welcome back to One Step Beyond with me, Theo Chalmers, and my special guest, Martin Summers. Well, okay, we've talked about the financial crisis. We've talked about geopolitical stuff, the real stuff that potentially is going on. I know this is the section of the show where you're going to reveal some stuff that has never been on British television, and very few people know about it. So let's hit the ground running.
Well, as a result of being on the BBC Conspiracy Files film, I was contacted by somebody who is an insider in the British arms trade. I don't want to reveal who it is because they basically don't want to reveal their identity. But if people want to check any of the things I'm about to say, they should look up the work of two other investigative journalists. One is Gordon Duff of Veterans Today, which is a US magazine for those who served in the US Armed Forces.
I'm familiar with that.
And the other is a guy called Peter Eyre, E-Y-R-E, who's recently put stuff up on Press TV, which is Iranian international television, about this topic. What we're being informed is that back in the late 80s, early 90s, when South Africa was making the transition to majority rule, they had already developed 10 nuclear weapons with the help of the Israelis at Pelindaba in South Africa, which was their nuclear facility.
It was their Dimona.
Yes, it was their Dimona. And the Magnus Malan, who was the defence minister of the apartheid regime, approached the British and the Americans and said, look, you know, the ANC are going to take over in South Africa, you know that, we know that. Would you like to buy these nuclear weapons off us? And 6 of these nuclear weapons were sold to the US.
Just like, these are 10 nuclear missiles.
They're nuclear warheads, basically.
They're warheads, but they didn't come with the missile.
No, I mean, the delivery systems were separate. I think the South Africans did have delivery systems, but I mean, basically the British and the Americans aren't interested in those. They've got their own delivery systems anyway. So there were warheads, basically, which they developed. There were uranium warheads rather than plutonium warheads. And 6 were sold to the Americans, and they were taken to Chicago and dismantled, although Gordon Duff thinks one of those went missing. 4 of them were sold, but not directly to the British government, but to a private consortium called Astra Holdings, which was headed by an ex-CIA, ex-MI6 officer, called Stephen Koch.
I think I ought to say, I ought to give a warning here that this is the opinion of my guest and may or may not be accurate.
Well, it's also, this is what I'm being told by my source, okay? So that my source could be misleading me, okay? But I think it is in the public interest for this to come out.
Yes,
and it's been covered, as I say, by Veterans Today and by Press TV, by Gordon Duff and by Peter Eyre. So it's not just myself. This is the first British outing for this story.
Okay.
The 4 of these nuclear weapons were bought by Astra Holdings, which was actually a sub part of Astra Fireworks, if you remember them.
Yeah, light up the sky with Astra Fireworks.
Yeah. That's the one, yes. So they went from bangers to nuclear warheads. The Astra Holdings basically was funded by a number of senior Tory politicians, including all of the senior people you can imagine. Yeah, so if I name a couple, Heseltine, Waldegrave.
Okay, these people, are they on the shareholders list?
They were the people who organised it. It was a guy called Sir Kenneth Warren who organised this. He was a former head of the DTI Trade and Industry Committee. He was a Tory MP. He was the guy. He was the principal behind all of this.
So this is, you're talking about a company that's registered in the UK.
Yes, and
so presumably you can check the shareholders.
Yeah, the point is that the people need to do all of their own research on this. Okay, I'm just pointing them in the right direction. Okay. So they got the money together. They bought the 4 warheads from Arms Corps, the South African arms industry people, but under the counter using a Zimbabwean arms dealer called John Bredenkamp. Okay, which again can be checked. People can check him out. Okay. So they then bought these 4, and 3 people went to South Africa to do this deal. One was Sir Kenneth Warren, who is still alive and lives in the Mendips. One was David Kelly, who was Dr. David Kelly,
who died mysteriously.
Who died mysteriously some years later. This was in 1989. He went because he was representing the British government to check that they really were nuclear weapons and that they were the things that they said they were. And the other young fellow who went, very early in his career, he was still a very lowly chap at that stage, was one David Cameron. This was before he was an MP.
Okay, so that's rather serious.
It is. So basically they went, when you listen to the full story, they went to South Africa to set this deal up for a private consortium to buy the weapons, which they did. The weapons were then sold on to the British government for 50 million quid. The final sign-off for this was done by Margaret Thatcher. It was the final thing she signed off, apparently, was this, 50 million quid. And then David Kelly was sent, and then the weapons were taken by Bredenkamp to Oman, which is a British puppet state, basically. The SAS were fighting their communist guerrillas there in the 70s, so the Sultan of Oman's very much in the British sphere of influence. So these 4 nuclear warheads went to Oman. David Kelly went out to check that they were there and found that Bredenkamp had replaced them with lumps of concrete. And that in actual fact, although the British taxpayer had paid 50 million quid for these weapons, which had gone into the pockets of the Astra shareholders, they actually went on into the black market. And £17.5 million of the money that was paid over by the British taxpayer went to the British Conservative Party to fund the 1992 general election.
And do you have evidence of this?
Yes, Doug Hoyle, who's a Labour MP, asked a question in the House of Commons about where this money had come from.
It's 17.8
million.
£17.8 million.
And there's no satisfactory answer was ever provided for that. Okay, so we've got a number. The other interesting aspect to this story is that after Labour came to power in 1997, the Nuclear Explosions Act of 1998 was passed, virtually unanimously in a virtually empty House of Commons on a wet Wednesday afternoon, and it was passed, I believe, at the behest of the British security services. And what that says is that any British citizen who is shown to be associated with an illegal nuclear weapon going off, who gets a mandatory life sentence. And I think this is directed quite explicitly at the senior Tory leadership by the security services. And indeed, one of these weapons did go off in North Korea.
Because they did let off a nuclear weapon.
They did, and that was.
But it was a bit of a damp squib, wasn't it?
It was just fizzle blow. It was one of the uranium warheads from Arms Corps that had been fizzle exploded. It wasn't a proper explosion, but it was one of those warheads. Now, 3 others of those warheads are still out there. Nobody quite knows where they are, and various speculations are being. Gordon Duff speculates that the Israelis have got them.
Or could Iran have them?
Well, that's one speculation that's being made. But of course, if Iran did have them, I don't think the West would be threatening to attack them. I suspect that the whole thing, don't forget the Israeli connection to Arms Corps. Bredenkamp is Zimbabwean, but of Jewish origin. The Israelis and the South Africans developed these nuclear weapons together. And we know about the Israeli role in, we'll come to it in the second, and another false flag attacks. And I suspect, and it's only speculation, that it's probably Mossad who is holding these nuclear weapons to use in false flag attacks. But that's only speculation. I've got no proof of that.
Yeah, and of course the Israelis have got lots and lots of nuclear weapons.
Yeah, but the point about these ones is that they can blow them up. They can blow that. Say they were to blow up Seattle, we're using one because these weapons are traceable. Once they explode, they say, "Oh, it's one of those." Yeah, nuclear weapons leave a signature. Now, if they use one of the ones from Dimona to blow up Seattle, it'd be pretty obvious who'd done it. If they use one of these and say, "Oh, that Al-Qaeda must have done that," they must have bought the weapons on the back market.
Is that because it's uranium and not plutonium?
Well, it's also, any kind of nuclear bomb has a signature, I understand, like a fingerprint. Yeah, so you can tell exactly which one it was.
But weren't they developed by the Israelis with the South Africans anyway? So wouldn't it have the Israelis?
Yeah, but I mean, they've already gone into the black market, so they could then argue that whoever got them was the Al-Qaeda terrorists. That's how they would finesse it. But if they'd used one of their own weapons from Dimona, it would be obvious who'd done it. Now, this is all speculative. Yeah?
Yes,
it's all speculative.
And I can imagine quite a few people getting very upset about this.
Well, exactly. I mean, I think one of the things I find positive about this is the British intelligence services seem to actually be chasing this down in a serious fashion. And I'm fairly confident they know, for example, that I'm talking about this tonight, and they're aware of me doing this, because the source that I'm getting this from is also talking to them, and I know that that's going on. And I think that basically they are potentially determined to get rid of this wrongdoing at the top, because all of the principals involved in this are all ex-Eton College people.
How do you know who went to Eton College?
Because it's on there's a record of all of it.
Yes.
And
Bullingdon Club.
Bullingdon Club and all the rest of it. I was at Oxford, I was never part of the Bullingdon Club because I never went to Eton. And I used to do my drinking in a different fashion from the way they used to do their drinking. The fact is that if this is true, and I stress if this is true, but I have looked into this everything that I've been told by my source has checked out when I've checked it, insofar as I've been able to check it. And I think that what we've got, basically, both in the political and financial spheres, is a criminal ruling class, a criminal elite who are literally breaking the law.
Well, Your Honour, he's very serious allegations that you mentioned David Cameron by name.
Yes.
And you say that he went on this secret mission to buy nuclear weapons.
Yes.
In South Africa.
That's
I mean, that is very serious, you know, that we have to be very careful that we don't get sued. So I'm saying that's your story.
Well, all I'm saying is that's what my source is telling me. And I've got, I've been talking to my source about this for quite a long time. I've checked out everything I can check out about it, and I haven't run this out before in this way. So this is this is being run out.
This is an exclusive on One Step Beyond. It's our exclusive. So
in the British media, but as I say, the Iranian International TV, Press TV, covered Peter Eyre's article about this, and Gordon Duff has been covering this in Veterans Today in the United States. So if you want to check this out and check the full details, I suggest you do a search and find Gordon Duff and Peter Eyre, and a lot more detail will be found therein. I'm giving you a very brief synopsis.